All right, artificial intelligence. I think this movie wasn't that bad. It's actually pretty good. So, Novums, you have David, who was like the first artificially intelligent robot that could have emotions or ostensibly have emotions. And then you also have the future mechas, which were like the alien-looking things that came at the very end of the story. As another novum of how did you get from Gigolo Joe to this whatever that was, the future mechas. Neologisms, you have mecha and orga to distinguish between robotic humanoids and organic people. And then you also have the flesh bear, which is kind of represented the resistance to integration of robots into human society. And then I'll talk more about mecha later and its, I guess, religious significance to aspects of the story. But specific characters, you have Professor Alan Hobby, who was the owner of Cybertronics. He's that guy that made David, and he was the person in the very opening scene of the movie. You have Henry and Monica Swinton, David's human parents. You have Martin Swinton, he was that little punk that I just didn't like him. But he was sick in a coma or something in the beginning of the story. That's why Henry and Monica decided to adopt David. And then eventually he gets better and he comes back and things get really awkward. But you have Teddy, which was Martin's old toy, but ends up being David's loyal companion throughout the entire story. You have Gigolo Joe, who was a sex bot who was framed for murder, so he's on the run. Lord Johnson Johnson was the MC / mercenary for the Flesh Bear. And then the future mechas were just those, I said, those alien robot things that you saw at the end of the movie. All right, so then environment, you have, in terms of background, the coastal cities have flooded. You have population control. You need to have permits to have kids or something like that. And you have the flesh bears in the wilderness. You also have Rogue City, which I don't know if you guys noticed, but all the buildings in Rogue City in that scene were all had sexual innuendo written all over it, which might be a testament towards how society thought at that time, or how the director wanted us to think about the society. And then of course you have 2,000 years later, fast forward to the end of the movie, you have Earth, it's a frozen wasteland, presumably in another ice age where there may or may not be humans still alive. And then you also have the virtual Swinton house, which was something that the future mechas made for David in the end scene. So major events, Henry brings David home because Martin's sick and he wants to help Monica with her grieving process. And then Monica decides to imprint David, where she says a string of words, and then that solidifies David's programming for his love for Monica, as his mother. And then you have Monica taking David back to Cybertronics to get disassembled because he they thought that he was trying to drown Martin, and there was that pool scene at his birthday party. But instead of bringing her David to Cybertronics for disassembling, she decides to just dump him off in the woods and let him live, so to speak. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in terms of her personal feelings and I guess the mercy she had on David. You have the flesh bear, which was kind of like I said earlier, representative of human resistance to integrating robots into their society. And one of the main events in that whole flesh bear scene was when the audience starts booing Lord Johnson Johnson for wanting to melt Gigolo Joe and David, because at that point it kind of signifies society's reversal and how they feel about integrating robots, and that they were able to empathize with a child robot that was capable of emotion. And then you have the scene where David finally makes it to Manhattan, and he's talking, or he walks into the room, and there's another David robot there, and he freaks out and kills him, and then Dr. Alan Hobby comes in and they talk. So that was kind of, that event was significant in that David is now asserting his own existence by killing his duplicate, and then he also tries to kill himself later. So I guess that's open for interpretation. Last two scenes, you have the future mechas excavating through like all the ice and stuff, and they find David and Teddy in a little amphibicopter thing. And then they decide to reunite David with Monica for a day because he had that like lock of hair that he like cut off or something. So yeah, those are the events in the movie in a nutshell. Ethical and political concerns. Like I said before, Gigolo Joe was framed for murder. And that brings up the idea of like, do these mechas have rights? Do they have a right to fair trial? When the police were hunting down Gigolo Joe, was it so he could be brought about like a trial with his peers, or are they just gonna like disassemble him? And then you also have like the flesh fair of like, was that ethical for them to just be like destroying and dismantling the outdated or like rogue robots, like for the sake of like recreation and entertainment, or like as a social statement. And then environmental concerns kind of goes hand in hand with like the scene where David's off in the woods and there's like this huge truck that just dumps off all these like old robot parts in the middle of the woods. So yeah, so for the creation piece, in terms of ethical concerns, the idea that like humanity can create another race or another like group, the robots, that are capable of like supplanting their own existence, kind of brings about this idea of like, do we as humans have the right to essentially do God's work and create like something else or create life and emotion? So like I said before, the neologism mecha kind of, it's like a homophone of mecha, which is like the Islamic something. I feel really bad that I don't know more about that, so I hope I'm not offending anyone. But there is a scene where kind of more aligned towards like Western religious thought, where David and Teddy and Gigolo Joe arrive in Manhattan and they're driving past the Cybertronics building and they see the lions weeping. So like, I don't know if it's just like too much C.S. Lewis on my part, but I always kind of associated like lions with like Jesus, and like the lions weeping kind of is like a like sadness to the fact that like humans are attempting to create like on their own. So I mean, that's open for interpretation as well. That's only my perspective on it. Yeah, so STS concepts. You have the idea of technological fix, where Martin was in a coma, and then the people at the hospital he was in, I guess, said that like there's going to be like a cure. We can find a like a technological fix for his illness, which is why they had him like frozen and preserved. And then you also have David functioning as a technological fix to address Monica's grief and I guess like sort of losing her real son. Value-laden technology. I thought the scene where Gigolo Joe and David talk to Dr. No was especially relatable to us in terms of like that instant access to knowledge, and like our like collective desire to have instant access to knowledge and have that accessible to everybody. And then of course you have Gigolo Joe as value-laden technology. I won't say any more on that. Technological momentum. You have, so initially what I was saying about technological momentum is that it's characterized by society determining how do we want to use these technologies, how do we want to regulate it. So like throughout the first part of the story, you definitely see human police pursuing and capturing Gigolo Joe, which is representative of society regulating its technology or like governing the mechas. But then like at the end of the movie, over a span of 2,000 years, you have that shift into technological determinism, where the future mechas are like ostensibly the only like living things on Earth. So this is just a quick recap of everything I've said in a nutshell. Yeah, are there any questions or comments?